Redlands here, two-time Olympian and Olympic bronze medalist, and welcome to another episode of Global Sports Channel's Sports Personality Spotlight. Now, our guest today is the most decorated US women's cyclist of all time and the best time trialist in sports history. So without further ado, let's get chatting with Kristin Armstrong. Kristin, welcome. I'm so happy to have you on the show. Oh my goodness. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this opportunity.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I mean, I've been looking you up and I'm just like, wow, whoa, wow, whoa, wow. But we'll get into all that. So where are you now? Where are you calling in from today?
I live in Idaho, so Boise, Idaho, which is in the northwest of North America. So we have 4 seasons. It's winter time, but we've had quite a mild winter.
Right. Now, did you grow up? Is that where you grew up or did you move there later?
No, actually, my father was a Marine, so we moved every 3 years of my life. And so growing up from kindergarten through 12th grade, which is the last year in high school in America, we moved every 3 years. And I only lived in America 3 years during that time. I graduated high school from Okinawa, Japan,
Wow.
and I went to school in Italy, and I do not speak Japanese, just so you know. And when I moved to America after being in Italy, I learned a little bit of Italian. So I went to the US for a few years and took Spanish. And then when I went to Japan, I took Spanish. So why not? Why not live in Japan and take Spanish?
Makes perfect sense to me. Leave the US, go all the way to Japan and Italy and learn how to speak Spanish. Perfect. I
I mean,
love
I
it.
wanted a challenge, right? I love challenges. So why not?
Yes, clearly. And you say you love challenges, and I'm looking at all the sports you've done when you were growing up, swimming, triathlete, all kinds of stuff. How did you gravitate to sports? I mean, why not music? Why not acting? How did you end
Yeah,
up
yeah.
in the sports world in such a big way?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like I just said, I was a military brat. And so every 3 years, when I moved, it was really the only way I made friends. And
Um,
so sports brought community. So we would move always during the summertime. And when we would get to a new place, can you imagine moving every 3 years of your life and trying to find new
yeah,
friends and a new team? And these days, I mean, you're on the same club team from when you're like 8. And so
right.
um,
Yeah,
every 3 years, you're just moving. And so sport was my only way to make new friends. And like I said, every 3 years I moved and I had to redo this. And we can talk about what that brought me later in sport, but when you're young and you move every 3 years and you're crying when you say goodbye, you think it's the worst thing in the world.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, it ends up being one of the best things for you. And
yeah.
I would never take that experience back for anything.
It's interesting you say that because my mum moved when I was young, nowhere near every 3 years, though. I mean, I can't even imagine what that was like. But you're right. It's like that upheaval every single time. And then you get to the next place and you have to do all this effort to reacclimate and get to know new people. But when I became a sports person, I realized how helpful that was because when I came from London to University of Southern California, it didn't hit me as hard, I think, as it might other people. Did you find that once you got into your professional career that all that traveling made you a bit more resilient?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I had so many teammates that, you start off in the sport of cycling, it's inevitable that you have to race in Europe. It's where the competition is.
Yeah,
In America, we didn't grow up with bikes. I mean, we rode bikes to our friend's house, but we didn't really compete on 2 wheels. We played ball sports, we ran track, when we did a lot of different things, but we didn't really race bikes. And so you have to go to Europe to make this happen. And when we would go to Europe, there's a lot of my teammates over the years that were awesome when they competed, I would call them on home turf in America. But when they would go over to Europe, they just couldn't make it. They got homesick. They had a hard time with the food. And so at the end of the day, there's no question that my upbringing and my childhood truly brought that resiliency needed to really become that athlete that I eventually became.
amazing. Now you just looking from the outside, I get this really sneaking feeling, Kristin, that you are quite competitive. And I'm getting the feeling that it might not just be in sports. Is that something that's just you, or were your family competitive? Where does that come from?
It's a never-ending question. I don't know where it comes from, but my friends and my family, I'll never forget my husband comes from a family with he's one of 8 kids. And he one time asked me, they asked me, we go to Christmas together, and somebody said, is there a chance that you can maybe just play like a card game without having to beat everybody? And my response was, why would you play the card game? Like,
Right.
I don't quite understand. Like,
Right.
I don't relate with why would you even play a game if you didn't want to win?
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I'm just a little bit competitive. My mom, she grew up in the generation where women didn't do sports. They were pretty much at home. Sports just wasn't a thing. But I can tell you that my mom has been one of the biggest supporters I've ever had. And so I don't always think that it takes having competitive parents to become competitive.
Yeah.
I've realized that it's sort of, part of my blood. It's in me. It's part of me. And so my dad, he was competitive. I would say that. My brother, he wasn't so competitive. And so I think that, your upbringing and maybe that environment that you're in truly forms maybe who you are when you're a little runt there,
Right.
moving around everywhere. And I don't know, it's just that drive that's always been in me.
I love it. Now, I have to ask then, because this generation seems to be a bit different in terms of
Mhm.
competition. Like you said, I'm just like, if you don't want to win, that's how I felt in 2012. I felt like if I wasn't going to be on at least in the final to have a chance to win, why put that jacket on? And there are people who don't feel that same way. But
Yeah.
this generation seems to be cool with like, hey, here's a medal for just showing up. Kristin, how do you feel about these participation medals?
Yeah, I have to say that it's a great question that you asked me, because I went to 4 Olympic Games. I went all the way back from Athens, Beijing, London, and then Rio. And one thing you might not know is that I retired twice. And so
Mhm.
I left the sport because I wanted to start a family. And I was at the age of 36. And so I was thinking, well, I better get on this because it's going to get too late. And then my intentions weren't to come back to the sport for London, but I did. And there was already like a lot of buzz around, I can't believe Kristin would make a comeback as a mom. That's the most selfish thing that I've ever heard of or ever seen. Why would she do that? Not only is it ridiculous because she's a mom now, heaven forbid you go after your goals once you're a mom,
I know.
but also like, this is going to be her 3rd Olympics. That's really selfish. That's not fair. So then I go through London, and I retire again. I have just a lot of, you probably experienced this as well, but I had a lot of injury with my hips, and I really just needed to kind of almost have a refresh of my body. I'm like, oh, I just need a normal life. I need to not get beat up anymore. And as you already mentioned, that competitive blood, I just hadn't found what was next for me. And I was about 15 months out from Rio, and I was like, I think I think I need to go try again, because qualifications, start happening about that time. So when I came back from my last Olympic Games, you can imagine I was over 40. I was a mom, and this is gonna be my 4th Olympic Games if I made it that to the selection. And it was really, really hard. It was probably one of the most difficult challenges I ever faced. In fact, I asked many times, like, why I even continued. I quit internally many, many times.
Mm.
And it was really a lot of, when you're a kid, you think of being bullied. And I felt like, wow, I didn't know that when you're 40 years old, you get bullied as well. And so I got bullied by, more cyber bullied, meaning over this exact topic around the ribbon winning generation. A lot of it was, it's not fair. You took 2 years off. I deserve to go. You don't deserve it anymore. And so it was all about being fair. And the fact that I took some time off, and in my mentality, as you can imagine, I had won 2 gold medals, one in Beijing and one in London. And as an athlete, I already, I look back and I'm thinking, I can't even believe the risk I took going to Rio, thinking, because they always say you're about as good as your last result. But as an athlete, when you've gotten on that podium, you never want to go back and not get on the podium, right? Your intention, whether you get there or not, is to get on the podium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had, when I started hearing all this, well, it's our turn. It's not your turn anymore. You're done. Why would you do this to us? I'm thinking, well, let the best person go. I mean, if you win during, obviously the selections, and you deserve to go and represent your country. And so I definitely felt that different generational mentality with exactly what you're mentioning, the ribbon, and everyone wins a ribbon. Everyone, gets a participation potential trophy in youth sports. And so I'm definitely not about that. I support the younger generation and the talent they have, but I also support those who are aging and are still able and are healthy and can compete at that level.
I 100,000 million trillion % agree with you, because we're the same age. I'm 43, and when I hear people saying that it's not fair, they should retire. I even heard someone talking about Serena Williams, that if she hadn't, this was someone high up in tennis, if she had any decency, she would retire and let the other. Well, she earned her spot, and if they want to earn theirs, they have to go through her to get it. So I'm happy that you came back, and they have to go through you if they want to get to the top. It's not sort of it's almost like candy, Halloween, hey, everyone gets one. No, you have to come and earn this. So I would 1,000% agree with that. But let's go back a bit and talk about how you even ended up focusing on cycling, because you were good at other things. You were good at triathlon, you were good at swimming. How did you end up saying, okay, I've got to go in this direction?
It all was off of an injury. I grew up, I played soccer, I ran, nothing like you. I ran the half mile, but you would call me slow. And I also swam. And so I graduated from college and decided that I wanted to still, stay in shape. And there was no longer, going after school or after class to practice. And that's a real huge transition for someone that's been an athlete all their life. And so I started doing triathlon because I'm thinking, well, it involves swimming and running. I maybe can take a shot at that. And I picked up the bike and became super strong on the bike. In fact, it became my strongest leg in the triathlon event. But I had really bad hip pain and so could no longer run. I started getting osteoarthritis. And so my physician just said, hey, if you don't want, a joint replacement, if you want to play with your kids someday, you need to pull the plug on this running stuff. And, if you are going to run, you need to run on softer surfaces like trails. But, this is beating you up at a young age. And this was in my 20s. And so I thought, I always said anyway that, traditionally, I thought when I was growing up that you were supposed to get a job, get married, have a family. And I got diagnosed with osteoarthritis about age 26. And I thought, oh, this is a sign. Somebody's telling me I'm too old to compete anymore. I need to get a job. I need to really focus in on what's next in my life. No, when you're in your upper 20s, you don't compete.
Right.
That's exactly what the textbook said. Oh, yeah. And so basically, I started working at an advertising agency as an account executive. And, I had met this guy along the way that owned this agency and thought, hey, you know what? You have the personality. I just hire personality. Something great. Teach me how to do this. So I started to go to work for him, and I had a local cycling team convince me to race with them. And I said, oh, I'm done. I'm done competing. I'm too old for it. I mean, come on, I'm like 26, 27 years old now. And I need to work. I need to not put things on my credit card anymore. Like these trips I would take as a pro triathlete. And before I knew it, the largest race in the world, this is crazy, the largest women's race in the world happened to start in my hometown in Boise, Idaho. I mean, Idaho's kind of in the middle of nowhere,
Right.
But this is where this big women's challenge started. And I used to watch it for years. I mean, I used to watch these women and I thought, who are these ladies? Like, they are incredible. And cyclists, they all sizes. You have the skinny ones that climb, and you have the
right.
Larger bottom ones that it's probably a lot like track, right? Like the sprinters are just stronger, and the cross country and the 10Kers are like as big as your arm. So basically, I just looked up to these women and thought, oh, they're just amazing, amazing competitors. And so being a local team, we are the token local team. And we got an entry into this like world-class race. And so this team came to me and said, Kristin, is there any chance that you would consider racing on our team? We got invited to the women's challenge. And I was like, not a chance. Why would I embarrass myself like that? That sounds awful.
Right.
And they're like, come on, this would be amazing. So my arm was twisted. I took all my vacation days. It was 9-day stage race. So you race every day back to back for 9 days. So after work, I would put a headlamp on and I would go out and I would just do loops. And then on the weekends, I would do the longer courses and I would memorize the mile marker signs, because if I got dropped from the big group of cyclists during the race, I would know how much further I had to the finish line. So I'm thinking, I'm going to get just cremated. Like, I mean, I can't even imagine competing with this group of ladies.
Right.
And so the day had come, and by the end of the week, I had 3 contract offers.
Wow.
And I was like, what is happening to me? And I was so tough. When I build a wall, it's hard for me to break it down. So I built this wall like, nope, I'm standing my ground. I have a job. I'm going to get serious about like real life. And I am now like 28 years old, and there's no way, I'm too old. And sure enough, I had a team that said, hey, listen, come to Europe with us, race with us for 2 weeks, and see how you like it. I'm like, okay. Some of my, the people who I looked up to were on this team, like, oh, this is going to be like a dream. And I went over there, and by the end of the stage race, the top team in the United States offered me a 2-year contract. So I took it. I left my job and wasn't making any money at all. I mean, barely to live. And I just took the risk. And, I always like to say, there's always opportunity around us, but it's those who see opportunity, right? That that take that risk. And who were to ever think that the largest women's cycling race landed in my town in Idaho, and I took vacation days to participate in that. If it wasn't for that, I would not be where I am today. It's a crazy thing.
Right. It's so amazing because like listening to your story, it just sounds like your destiny chased you down. Like, it's like, girl,
Yeah.
you are going to
No, it's so weird.
That's the end of it.
And I used to make fun of people in college. I'm like, who are these people in spandex? Like,
Right.
why would they ever go ride a bike with these shorts? That was me in college. They're
Right.
weird.
Right. I mean, because you did other sports, but your
Oh,
own
yeah.
body wouldn't allow you to do those other sports, kind of pushed you into this world. You tried to shut it out again, and here it comes. Hello,
Yo.
we're cycling and we're in Idaho.
Yes.
What are you gonna
Yes.
do?
I'm like,
I love it.
I can't run away anymore.
And you couldn't run away or cycle away, which now that's really interesting. You went pro, and what you were talking about, the finances, because I think that's a huge thing with sports, as particularly for women, and in all sports we don't even get paid the same, men versus women, especially, that's a big issue in soccer. Now, a lot of people think that once you go pro, that's it. You're good to go. What's that like, the financial side? Like you said, putting stuff on your credit card. How do you manage, and when do you ever get to that point where it's actually viable. It's actually something you can live. It's actually a career, because it's a real struggle trying to work and do this at the level that you've done it.
Yeah, so many women are trying to put everything into the sport they love and not making money. In fact, that's why I sometimes laugh about being pro, because really, like, what does pro mean? Pro means that you're paying your way to competition, to kind of climb the ranks and hopefully get a sponsor or an endorsement.
Right.
And then you have a sport like cycling where it's like, what, cycling? You went bicycling, and what did you do on your bike?
Right.
It's not like running. It's like, we know what running is. Like, you run around the
Right.
track. Cycling is like, oh, you can imagine what people think cycling is. I mean, I get called a cycler. I'm like, you name it. They asked me if I, used to, do any of the commuting, on my bike. And so there's just a lot of, it's very broad. But as a female athlete, it is a struggle. I always was so focused on keeping a part-time job throughout my career. And there was a lot of reasons I did that. And it was because I had the opportunity, because somebody allowed me to work part-time while I was home, especially in the off season. Because, before I had a child, there was a lot of time for an athlete in the day, meaning sometimes having that extra balance can be a secret weapon when it comes to overthinking. You have a bad workout that day and you go home and you just feel sorry for yourself.
Right.
Whereas when I worked, I felt like I was engaging myself right into like a normal population of people.
Right.
And they would be like, "Oh, Kristin, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to tell these people about my bad workout. That's that's like not even relevant today." And so I think that in hindsight, it helped me. However, to your point, it is a continuous struggle. In fact, when I was racing, I could count in America probably on one hand how many people made over $20,000 a
Wow.
year. Yes. And then it's amazing. And you might get the same questions, but number one, when you become an Olympian, and then number two, when you win a medal, people think you're like a NFL football player.
Yeah,
They're
you're
like,
made.
"You are worth millions, girl." And I'm like, "Oh no, if you only knew."
Right.
I get asked all the time, like, why do you still work? I'm like, I don't know. I have to pay some bill. Like there is this perception
Right.
of what happens when you become an Olympian. And it doesn't even, there's a perception for just becoming an Olympian. And there's a perception of when you win a medal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I coach a number of women now, and I'm always grooming and teaching and educating how important it is to become well-rounded, if you get injured tomorrow, where are you going to take yourself?
Right.
What are you going to do? I encourage them to volunteer. I encourage them to get out and improve their speaking skills, because at the end of the day, telling your story and doing something, I always call it off the bike. You might say off the track, or,
Right.
whatever that sport is, off the field, but you have to become an engaging, you have to bring that humanistic side of you to the public, right? Because that's what they want to hear. But the getting paid is just tough. And you can imagine, if there was truly proper salaries out there, how many more athletes would be out there taking opportunity to do what we did?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, girls, preach, preach. I mean, seriously. I mean, even what you were saying about the misconception about what it's like once you turn pro, what it's like once
Yeah.
you have a medal. I remember, as you were speaking, I just remember sitting at a train station after I'd gotten my medal, and this guy keeps looking at me, keeps looking at me, keeps looking at me, and eventually goes, "You're the athlete, ain't you?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you doing here?" I was like, waiting for a
Yeah.
train like you. He's like,
Yeah.
"Shouldn't you be in a limo or something?" And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people think that you're living this jet setting life and everything's perfect. But I think it's important, like you said, to teach the next generation to think about what's next. What if it doesn't happen? you know, the way you think it's going to happen? What if it ends before you expect it to end? That is such an important message, and I love that you brought that up. Now, you actually, I think it was 2 years before the 2004 Olympics that you went pro, and you went for the time trial, correct? For the people, like you said, it's a broad spectrum in cycling. So for people that don't know what time trial is, tell us a bit more about the event itself.
So the time trial is basically when a rider, it's you against the clock. They call it the race of truth. So every 2 minutes, a rider will go off on the same course, and then the next 2 minutes, another rider will go off. And so at the end of the day, the fastest time wins. So if you can think about it as, can you imagine if you were in the mile race, running race, and you, instead of running in a pack together and having the gun go off at the beginning and everyone goes, you would be on a time trial format where one person would go, then the next person. So the tactics change dramatically.
Right.
So we have the time trial, and then we have what we call the road race, which is more so the style of, it's a bunch start. So everyone starts together and then the tactics begin. So again, you know, in a lot of sports, you can relate to, there's a lot of drafting that happens when you're with a bunch versus when you're alone.
Right.
There's also the mental piece of it. When you're out doing a workout alone, trying to get your intervals in, imagine the difference, right? I mean, the training is the hard part. The racing should be like that piece of like, I'm ready, I'm going out there. And now you have people to race against.
Right.
When you have people to race against, that mentality, it's almost like it doesn't take as much focus. I mean, yes, you have to focus, but when you're training by yourself, you against the clock, there's nothing more than what gets in your head during that time, right? And so my event, depending on the Olympics, it's crazy because the distance can change. So the rules and regulations say that the time trial for women can be between 20 kilometers and 20 kilometers and 30 kilometers.
Right.
So imagine training for an event that can be anywhere from 26 minutes, your finish time, to 43 minutes.
Wow.
And that's a big difference.
Yeah.
And so in Rio, it was 30 kilometers. So it was like the longest duration that the event can be. So it was about a 43, 44 minute time trial for myself. So it was a lot of focus by yourself out there.
Right.
And you have a radio in your ear. You normally have your coach behind you in a car, and he's speaking to you, helping you navigate. You're going pretty quick, and there will be turns that come up. And so it really helps for a coach to say, in 200 meters, you're gonna have a right-hand turn. You can stay in your aero bars. And so you have a lot of trust. It's almost like a navigator.
Right. How far before an event do you know how long the distance is going to be?
Oh, it will be published well before. In fact, you know, Tokyo is a shorter time trial. And so you'll know typically 2 years before.
Oh, okay. Wow. And
way before. Yeah.
Is it seeded like the slowest goes off first or the fastest go? How do they choose who, you know, the order of those 2 minutes?
So the great thing is, in the Olympic Games, the Olympic champion always goes last. And so you can imagine the benefits of having time checks. So I knew there was 2 time checks in Rio, and I knew 9 kilometers in that I was 9 seconds up.
Nice.
And we also had people from my husband and then another coach that I work with. They ran up the road. So we wanted not only a 9 kilometer time check, but we wanted a time check at 4.5 kilometers, because we knew at the beginning of the race, if you're behind, it's really hard to come back.
Right.
And so we didn't want to wait for a 9K to be told that I was down in time. So they ran out there on foot, because you couldn't go out there in the car. So they ran out there on foot and stood out there and had the list of competitors and pretty much took time checks on everybody, so they could tell me exactly where I was at 4K as well.
Wow. Wow. That's teamwork makes the dream work.
Oh, I'm telling you, like, and you wouldn't believe. So I'm one that's like, you can tell I'm competitive, you're competitive, but I also am I try to think, I think maybe that came with age. You always are trying to think of how am I going to beat my competitor, because every year people get faster and people's equipment get better. And the minute you think that you have like the best helmet, 4 years later, everyone has that helmet. And so you think about, I'm the engine, but I also have like this bike that has to be super aerodynamic. I mean, I went to wind tunnels down, one of them is down in San Diego, and it's where they test race cars and airplanes. So for aerodynamics. So I had to get my body in the fastest position possible to shave off the watts, the power I was putting out. Because, as you get older, you're thinking, okay, maybe I can't recover as much. And maybe everyone is as powerful as I am. However, how can I beat them with my equipment now? And so in Rio, we had a course that was really hilly. And my bike was probably, this is crazy, this is a lot of weight in cycling. My bike was probably 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds lighter than any of my competitors.
Wow. Some people are struggling
so
to just get 2 pounds off their body, so we understand the benefits of those 2 pounds.
Yeah,
Wow.
all the details. It took, my husband, he replaced every screw on my bike with titanium screws. We had an ounce scale out. So it's just all the detail that goes into your performance. And I'm fortunate that I had opportunities to go to more than one Olympic Games, because I feel like that first one is sort of like, whoa, oh my gosh, like everything's so shiny, and the opening ceremony, and this is a dream come true. I'm finally an Olympian. And then afterwards, you're like, it's come and goes, and you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. I need to go do this again.
Redo. Can I get a redo?
I need a redo.
Right. Now, you mentioned your husband, and he's been pretty big team player. I read that he had actually created a prototype for another thing that where you could dot your I and cross your T. What did that what was it, and how did it help?
So basically in 2006 World Championships, I was in the lead and I dropped my chain. And I dropped my chain enough where sometimes when you're on your bike, you can get your chain back on, believe it or not, without stopping. But this time around, I couldn't. I had to straddle my bike. It was a panic situation. I got back on my bike and I still ended up winning. That was my first World Championship win in 2006. So in 2008, when I made the Beijing team, you go from a downhill in Beijing to a 180-degree turn, and then you have about a 500 meters to the finish uphill. So what happens in cycling is when you drop your chain, you're typically going from your big chain ring in the front of your bike to your small chain ring, and you're creating too much pressure, and it's called cross chaining. Well, my husband was so nervous that in Beijing, I would go for that final 500 and just drop my chain. So him being the engineer, he's like, how am I going to get Kristin from not dropping her chain? Like, this is incredible. And so he designed a prototype for Beijing that basically it would be impossible to drop my chain. And so he built that contraption, and he had it ready a couple weeks before Beijing. And so I didn't drop my chain, and obviously everything paid off. But your team, whether it's your partner, your husband, your wife, your coach, over time, my team just grew, and we trusted one another. And whether it was a physical therapist or a strength coach or my cycling coach, when you first start as an athlete, you think, oh, I just need one coach and he's going to do or she's going to do everything for me. But what you do is the more trust you have and the more experts you let in your kind of arena, you become one big team. And that really, to me, is a differentiator in where you can go. And this is true, I think, for sport, but also in life. And I know a lot of people have a hard time trusting more than one or two people
Right.
maybe helping them.
Right.
But I do encourage people to let more people in, because there's a lot of really, really smart people and experts out there that just can really lift that level.
Right. Absolutely. Firstly, I want to say, please ask your husband if he can make me some new knees and a new back. That would be
Yeah.
great.
Oh,
And,
oh yeah.
and other than
Is
that,
that the thing that goes out when
oh my
you
gosh, as a
hurdle, and
hurdler, because
is it the knees and
yeah,
yeah.
the knees, because constant impact, so if he's into prototypes and he's got any new knees and things he's coming up with, I'll be I'll be
Oh my
fine.
goodness. It's
But
funny how every sport has its different
has their
injury.
thing. Yeah, what's the thing in cycling that comes up a lot as far as injuries?
Well, as far as short-term injury, pretty much we call it the collarbone club. When you crash, you normally break your collarbone
Ouch.
because you hit so hard that you don't put your hand out.
Gotcha.
But for me, I've had 4 hip surgeries and a back surgery. So
Right.
even though it's non-impact, you can imagine how many times you pedal
Yeah, just
day after day.
constant. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's the other thing. I always joke about how I think federations and the Olympic, the IOC or U.S. Olympic Committee. My dream is like athletes that go to the Olympics and represent their country should have lifetime health insurance.
Please. Yes. This girl is talking. I
I'm
mean,
like,
seriously. Seriously, I mean, in every sport,
right?
because there is so much pounding and damage on the body in such a short space of time. People have the kinds of injuries at a very young age that people don't even get when they're in their 60s. So, no, I think
I know.
that's huge, and that would be great if we could start doing that
I know,
stuff and start
right?
protecting the athletes, because we do have to live. There is life after sports, so that's a
I
big
know.
deal. Now let's go back a bit. Your first Olympics, 2004, Athens, like you said, very shiny, very whoo. But something changes between Athens and Beijing, because you
Mhm.
went from eighth to podium,
Yeah.
and that doesn't
Yeah.
happen for a lot of athletes. It could take even longer than 4 years for them to ever get to that gold medal position. You
Mhm.
talked about team. What were the things that were going on between, other than your husband
Yeah.
coming up with
Yeah.
prototypes and things like that brought you from that eighth position
Hmm.
to that podium win? I mean, that's a
Yeah. Yeah.
serious win.
It is. And it is really truly when I say the little things. And what I like to say is that no matter your sport, no matter what you do, it could be business, it can be an entrepreneur, it can be anything you do in life. When you're riding or you're training every day, your competitors are doing the same thing as you are. I mean, yeah, they might have a different coach, but really, if you look at a runner, this is how many miles generally someone's doing. When you're a cyclist, this is how many miles generally a female's doing.
Right.
And you're doing intervals, and I mean, if you have a smart coach, you're doing it all.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are you doing differently than everybody else?
Right.
And so one of them, I would say, was a big game changer. So imagine Olympics in Beijing, and it's like, oh my gosh, are you going to have an asthma attack there? Is the air quality, is it going to be okay when you get there?
Right.
There's a lot of questions around how are you going to compete in Beijing as an athlete in the healthiest way possible? And one of the important things in cycling is you can imagine reviewing the course, thinking and seeing the course.
Right.
And although technology has changed, from 2008 drastically, I flew over to Beijing in December before the games. I
Right.
qualified early because I was on the podium at the World Championships, and that's an automatic qualifier in our sport for
Right.
the Olympic Games. So I fly to Beijing and I review the course, and I actually bring my Garmin computer and I track everything. Well, believe it or not, like now I can get on different software packages and I can route a course from my home right now, and I can look at the elevation gain, I can look at the wind speed. None of that was happening in 2008.
Right.
I came home, I downloaded the course, and we plotted it out on an Excel spreadsheet. And then we looked at Google Earth. It was crazy. And then we actually took that course and all of the different data points we had, and we created a course exactly the same in Boise, Idaho,
Right.
so that I can go train exactly how the course in Beijing was.
Wow.
So if you think about specificity, that's what we were able to do, which is a game changer in the sport of cycling. So whenever you have a course and you know it well, you're going to do better. That's how it works.
Right.
And then obviously I've already talked about aerodynamics and how important that is in your body position and the drag numbers. I mean, because we train off of power. So we have power meters on our bike, and that's how much it measures watts. And so the more aerodynamic you are, the less watts you have to push, and the
Right.
faster you go. I mean, it's a simple formula. And so I was one of the first women to actually go into a wind tunnel and
Wow.
really kind of start and set that stage of like, this is what you do to be the best. So those two things, flying to Beijing, going into the wind tunnel, were game changers in 2008. Now you fast forward to 2012, and now the top competitors wouldn't think about not going to the wind tunnel. And top competitors wouldn't think about not looking and reviewing and flying to a course.
Right.
And so there was definitely some kind of trailblazing that I, was doing, but I keep my cards really close, meaning, again, 2008, social media wasn't a thing.
Right.
You don't take pictures on Instagram and show everyone that you're doing a wind tunnel test.
Right.
Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows you flew to Beijing, but today, if you flew to Beijing, you would have to take a picture of yourself going
Right,
to Beijing, because that's
Of
what you
course.
do.
Right, of course.
So I remember back in the early days of social media, I remember like Twitter that's why I think that, Twitter was kind of the thing kind of early on in sport. And so I used to follow my competitors on Twitter just to know what they were doing, because they would actually say it. They might not take a picture. They'd be like, oh, I went to the wind tunnel today. I'm like, oh, great. I'm glad you went to the wind tunnel. Or I'm getting over, the flu. So, going from Athens to Beijing, number one, going to the Olympic Games a second time, I'm not saying that you should count on that, let alone go to the Olympic Games the first time.
Right.
But if you have the opportunity, there is a difference in the confidence level you have. There's a big level of nerves that go away. All of a sudden, I'm like, I'm not going to the opening ceremonies because I have to stand on my feet for 8 hours.
Yep. Hello.
Right? Nobody knows that you're like huddled into a room and you're like,
exactly.
You're back at like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yep. Exactly.
So there were smart decisions that I made and I learned as, everyone has to be a rookie at some point. So I, made big gains through recon. I trained hard. I was so new in the sport. In the sport, when you first start, you normally have like a big, like you see like huge improvements, and then you kind of plateau a little bit. If you think about, I started racing professionally in 2003. That was my first contract.
Right.
So 2004, and then you think about going to 2008, those first 6 years, the first 6 years of sport, you see a huge gains made.
Yeah.
And after that, it's kind of like, oh, how am I going to continue to be my best, all the time?
Right. Absolutely. And I think, just for people's perspective of what it takes, it's not just the effort and the energy. Financially, this is a lot. Flying to these locations, the wind tunnel, I heard that's like $1,000 an hour to be in a wind tunnel. So, these are not just expenses of your energy and your time. They're actually expenses of from your pocket as well. So it's a big deal to make sure that you've crossed every I. And of course, it's paid off for you. So we can't complain. But
yeah,
after 2008, wonderful, amazing victory, you decided to have some time off to have your son. But What I want to say is, ask about is how confident were you about that period of time that this was the right time? Because I know
Mm.
so many women are afraid to take any time off for kids. And I know so many that have waited to the end and then they regret it because for whatever reason, kids aren't just coming left, right, and center. So, how did you guys make that decision? How did you know this was the right
Yeah.
time? And were you ever worried that you may never be back in cycling the way you were before?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's kind of hypocritical to say, but prior to having a child, I always knew I wanted a child. In fact, I wanted a
Right,
couple of children.
right,
And you get in competition, and all of a sudden, time is flying by, and you're like, whoa, 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 I'm 35, 36 years old. And, you start reading things of how old can you be and have a healthy child, and
right.
a lot of things have changed now. You can prepare differently, and have children later, but even just 10 years ago, you didn't know this. And so my goal was, when I retired from sport after, winning a gold medal, like, why would I even come back? In fact, what people made fun of me for, not made fun, but kind of were hard on me when I did come back, is you're going to be a mom and you're still going to go after the Olympics, your dream. I mean, don't you need to take care of your child? That's really selfish. And so, honestly, that's what I had thought going into my pregnancy. I thought, well, when I retire, I'm retired because it's not about me anymore. It's about my
Yeah.
child. So it wasn't long after having Lucas, in fact, probably within a month or 2 months of delivery, to be honest with you, I had those thoughts. We were about 20 months from London. And that's when I thought, wow, maybe I could make a comeback. And how fun would that be as a mom? So my
Right.
whole perception change of what I thought you should do when you become a mom, which is like, I thought everything just was be poured into your child, and no longer could you even think about having your own performance goals.
Right.
And once I actually went through pregnancy and had a child, my mindset changed, and I flipped the switch and I said, well, wow, I can't imagine not having an Olympic journey with my son and bringing him through this journey, because there's nothing better than the idea that you can show the world that a mom can make it too, and that
Right.
you're leading by good, a good example for your children. And I just changed my whole attitude. And instead of being on the road without my family came with me. And so
Right.
that was very different. And, there's a lot of different things in cycling. You have a team, and you can imagine you have a young team, 20-year-olds, and, heaven forbid that, you bring your husband and child. That's just not professional. And so I had to find an environment and a team that supported me and my family coming along. And I'll never forget going to the airport with a pack and play and a bob stroller and thinking, is this for real? I can't even believe I'm doing this. But, but looking back, I think, people ask me all the time, what was my favorite Olympic Games? And I don't have a favorite Olympic Games, but I'll tell you, the moment on the podium in London with Lucas in my arms was my favorite moment.
Love it.
Um, because you just can't take that away. And he was only 2 at the time. And then fast forward, when I went back to Rio, the coolest part about that was, at age 2, you're like, huh, what? I don't even know who I am. But at age 6, he knew exactly, and
Yeah.
he still remembers. And I think about it and I'm like, wow, if Lucas didn't go through this with me, it, it would just be like me telling him stories about, oh, before you were born, mommy used to compete
Right.
before you. I mean, it was so cool. And so I encourage women, it's not for everybody, but I encourage women that when you have a child, it's not it doesn't mean your goals go away. In fact,
Right.
it's a great example to your children to go after something and see what it takes and the hard work and the dedication that
Right.
is required. And so
Right.
I wouldn't take that away for a second.
I love it. You know, I can relate. It's slightly different me because I didn't have a goal when I went back after having my son, but I definitely felt that, that kind of perspective of, oh, are you sure you should be doing that? You're washed up, and that can be really hard for women, that comeback. But I did also feel like you that it was a benefit for him because
Hmm.
now he knows that he's not the reason that I quit on my dreams. And I think that's really important. And the example of him being able to come and watch you, and like you said, first he thinks the gold medal's made of chocolate, and then, you know, gets to age
I
6.
know.
Now he really understands what's happening and he can be proud. Now you've broken so many, barriers. First woman in a wind tunnel. You first woman to win 3 consecutive gold medals. You're the oldest woman to get a medal at the Olympics in your event. I mean, how does it feel to literally know that you are a legend? You're literally a legend in your field. What does that feel like?
Uh, it's interesting. I do a lot of public speaking and I do some podcasts here and there, such as the one we're on right now. And truly, people will hire me to come speak, or I'll go do a school talk, and I'm here to inspire others and motivate them, whatever they want me to talk about, I do. And honestly, I am the person, and I just consider myself a normal person. I have to be reminded that these things have happened. I don't wake up in the morning and think that, oh my gosh, I'm a record holder and I'm a world, I break down these barriers and I'm this and that. I honestly, unless people ask me to take a picture with my medal, it's not something that I wake up every day and think that I'm a gold medalist. I remember when I was a kid watching the Olympics thinking, these people are phenomenal. I think about that with actresses. I think about these people are just untouchable humans. However, I also like to tell people that we are just normal people. And the first time I went to the Olympic Village, I was looking around and I thought, what sport is everyone around me in? Because you have this idea that you have to be something, you have to look some certain way, you have to have this much muscle, you have to be this size. But in reality, as you know, we're all just normal human beings. And I'm, generally a very humble person. So again, people like yourself have to remind me of what I've accomplished.
Right.
I don't wake up thinking about it, and it's still, I have to pinch myself. And sometimes when I talk or I give a talk, I get, people don't know this, but I get goosebumps and I do tear up when it has to do anything with my son or my family. And so, it is, yeah, the accomplishments that have happened in my life, I'm grateful for. I'm so happy that I found the opportunity and I jumped on it. Like you said, it pretty much chased me down. Um, but I'm glad that I followed this journey and have accomplished what I have. But now I find great joy in sharing my experiences and my journey with others, and I want to help people accomplish what they want to. And so I found that I kept going back to the sport because I just couldn't find something. I don't know, nothing drove me like going to Olympic Games. That's a
Yeah.
pinnacle to me.
Yeah.
And so finally, after Rio, I realized that maybe I was struggling with what's next because it was always about what can I do to perform. And
Mm.
I flipped it and now thinking, how can I help others perform? But just normal people, not like everyone has to perform on a bike.
Right.
Just how do I help others have confidence, find their team, and perform in whatever it is they want to perform in?
Absolutely. I mean, that's huge because so many athletes are lost. They're really, truly lost. And
Yeah.
that's why a lot of them end up in depression. A lot of them end up depressed after sports, feeling suicidal and all sorts of things, because there's nothing that compares. There's nothing that compares
I
to
know.
every year there's something to shoot for, and then that bubble pops and you're in regular life, and if you want to shoot for something, you got to figure out what it is for yourself, and it just doesn't seem like there's many things in life that really match up to that. So like you said, that refocusing. So what are you up to now? I know you've been involved and you've created a lot of businesses and you've been involved in a lot of business ventures. What are you up to now? What do you do now?
Oh, there's just so many things. I think that the minute I have 5 minutes open on my schedule and somebody comes in right in those open 5 minutes, I'm like, sure, let me be part of that. But I would say that my biggest focuses right now are, of course, my family. It's been an interesting year with my son. He's in fourth grade. He's 10 years old, and he's online going to school quite often. But on top of that, we opened up a couple of fitness centers here in Idaho, which are going really well. And we named them Pivot, and we didn't even know the pandemic was going to come, but it's a perfect name. It's always time to pivot.
Yeah.
And, most recently, I've partnered with two women to start a group coaching platform called KX3 Lifestyle and Coaching. And it's for women. And it's truly like what we talked about. You don't have to be a cyclist. It's getting together and speaking about different things to help you map your way and how can you become successful in whatever you want to be successful in. And so, people think you have to be on the bike when you talk to me, but this is not about being on the bike. This is everything happens off the bike.
Right, right. I might need to join that group. Seriously.
Oh yeah, you have so much. I feel like we all have so much to share with one another,
Yeah.
and connecting one another with one another is the hard part. And most often I have found through my fitness center, community is really what has driven the results of the members at Pivot. And so I thought, well, why wouldn't I bring women together on a group coaching platform and drive results through community,
Yeah.
not in person? I mean, people, with our accomplishments, we know how to navigate where we need to go. We have been here, we've been there, we have a connection. Oh, you have a hurt knee? You know exactly who to call for your hurt knee.
Right.
But the navigation and the community and the connections and the connectivity and the support from others is not an easy thing to find, especially these days.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's a lot of people out there that want to connect with others, and there's no better time than now.
Absolutely. I want to touch on one other thing, because I know with such a long career, you would have experienced those emotional ups and downs where maybe there were
Yeah.
times when you didn't believe in yourself. Maybe there were times when you didn't lose the passion. What advice do you have for people that get to that stage where they maybe have lost their passion for whatever it is that they're
Mhm.
used to doing?
Mhm.
And, what should they do to try and turn things around in that
Yeah.
respect, whether it's business or life or
Mhm.
sports?
Yeah, the passion is an interesting thing because we obviously, a lot of times, right, we get involved in something because of the passion we have. And then we exit something because we've lost the passion and it's become work and it's become no fun. And so how do you find that passion again in something? And does it ever come back? And it's a tough one because it does ebb and flow, and it has big highs and it has big lows sometimes. But the key thing is you have to realize that, number one, this is normal. You're not alone. This happens to everybody. I find that this is not necessarily for everybody, but what I find that helps is I share what I'm going after, my goals, my plans with a number of people. I don't announce it to the world, but my significant other, my husband, my coworker, maybe my best friend, like I share my goals with other people. It helps me for a couple of reasons. One, it helps me with accountability, but also it helps me when I do have these lows, that they're there for me. Because what happens is a lot of times we feel vulnerable when we feel weak, and we don't like to share that with anybody. A lot of times on the outside, we like to feel and look tougher than we are.
Right.
But vulnerability is strength. When you're vulnerable and you share things, what you're going through with people, it's very healthy. I think that when you trap these thoughts and feelings inside, it can become a downward spiral very quickly. And it's a very lonely place to be.
Absolutely.
And so I encourage people to share more than maybe they feel comfortable with. And that remember that vulnerability is strength. It can really be powerful. I think that the other piece is a lot of times when we become unhappy or we feel that we're kind of losing that fire that we have, really be aware of your environment. Have you entered into another phase of your life? I became a mom and I had to change my environment. I couldn't hang out or be part of a team with a bunch of 20-year-olds and waiting around for my massage and someone to cook me lunch. Like, it just wasn't who I was anymore.
Right.
And so always do a check-in with yourself of, is this the environment that I should still be in? Because the environment is really a huge foundation for success.
Yeah.
And just sometimes changing your environment can lift you again and create new opportunity, kind of spark you in a different way, inspire you in a different way. And so, those are my little piece of advice.
I love it. Super, super powerful advice there. Absolutely. Things that not just athletes, but just the everyday person can really take from. Now, I did hear that your bike that you rode in 2012 was stolen, the one that you got the gold medal in 2012 with, but I do see one behind you. Is that a
Yeah.
significant bike there behind you?
Yeah, I have a couple bikes on my wall. I have all three of my bikes and my jerseys. Actually, my third bike, you'll see it's empty. That's where it should be, where that light is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Idaho National Museum will have my medals and my bike on display for the next year. So kids and families can go and tour the National Museum of Idaho and check out, the bikes I rode in the Olympics. And that's a fun little thing. So yeah, my bike was stolen. The one that you see directly behind me is a replica of that bike.
Oh,
The company, rebuilt. Of course, people ask me all the time, are your bikes more important than your medals? And, they all have a special meaning. The medals for me, I keep them out and I share them. I'm one of the athletes that I bring them everywhere I go, meaning when I have a public event, or especially when I go to a school talk. People always say, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen a gold medal." I'm like,
Yeah.
I hadn't either, only my own. It's not often.
Right. I love that. I'm the same. I mean, mine is around here somewhere. Oh, it's right here actually.
Yeah, right.
So I'll shoot a bit. And it looks a mess. Like, I mean, you would never
I
know that this was
know.
something that I spent years training for. But when I go
Don't
to
you
the
wish you
schools,
had, like,
a
people
second
ask me
one.
all the time, like, they ask me all the time, is that your real one? I'm like, if I can get a replica, I would. But they won't give
Absolutely.
me one. They won't even give me a new strap.
I was thinking that because I'm like you. I let the kids touch it. I let the kids play with it because after all,
Me
it's a
too.
thing, right? And I'll be the bronze medalist no matter what. So
Yeah.
I'd love for them to touch it and think, man, this might be possible for me someday. So I'm totally with you on that one.
That's how
Now
I felt. Yeah.
I love it. I'm wrapping up now, but before I go, I always like to play a little game with my guests, a game of this or that. So I'm just going to say two things and you will say one or the other. All right, you game for
Okay.
that?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. All right. So mental toughness or physical toughness?
Mental.
At home or on the road? Or
At
you
home.
might say on the bike or off the bike.
Yeah. These days at home.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Olympic podium or speaking podium?
Olympic podium.
I love it. Businesswoman or sportswoman?
Oh, sportswoman.
And last but not least, I'm going Oprah Winfrey on you now. What do you want the world to know?
I want the world to know that anything's possible, and that never let anyone tell you that you can't, because you can. In life, we're fortunate. We don't have to do things. I always tell people you get to pay your mortgage when you have a job.
Right.
You get to go to school. It's not, you have to. And quite often, people ask me, why? Why are you making a comeback? Why do you continue doing what you do? Why did you open 2 fitness centers? There's a lot of whys. And I think long and hard about these whys. And one day I woke up and I said to myself, it's simple. It's because I can. And I encourage people to do things because they can.
I love it. That gave me goosebumps. No joke. That, I mean, such an amazing message. I love it. Kristin, it's been such an honor to talk to you today. And the fact that today is National Women's in Sports Day, I'm just so happy that we got to talk on this very special occasion. And I just want to thank you for your contribution to sport, especially to women's sports. So thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for all that you continue to do as a legend in sport. Now, people are going to want to know, if they don't know you already, they're going to want to know where you're at. How can they get to your class? How can they hear your podcast? How can they just stalk you online? Where are you?
How can they stalk me? Well, these days I feel like I would leave something out if I didn't tell everyone my Instagram handle, which
Of
is
course.
kstrong22. And
right.
But other than that, we obviously, the women's platform is kx3lifestyleandcoaching.com. Everyone's welcome.
Awesome.
And I have a website, KristinArmstrongUSA.com, but just Google me. That's the simplest piece, I guess.
Awesome. And your podcast is on your website as well?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, from one mother in sports to another mother in sports, thank you so much for spending time with us. I know there's plenty of things you could be getting up to, but you took the time to be with us, and I do truly appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
I appreciate the conversation. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, you too.
Seriously, guys, seriously, I got goosebumps, especially as she was speaking in that last piece and just talking about what she wants the world to know. I mean, it just summed everything up. I am in love. This is my crush. She is awesome, fantastic, a really amazing woman. So I will just say, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure that you like, share, and follow, and of course, comment. What was something that really stood out for you? I know that final piece that she talked about, never let anyone tell you that you can't, was huge. So what comment, what thing did she say that really struck you? I'd love for you to mention that in the comments and let us know. And don't forget, if you're watching this on YouTube, that you can hit that bell and you can get it to let you know when other things are coming up. But otherwise, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Wherever you are in the world, we truly appreciate you, and we'll see you again soon. That's all for me. Ciao for now.